Angela Langlotz, trademark and business law attorney here, back to talk about trademarks and business and whatever the heck else I feel like. Today, I'd like to talk about international classes and related goods. Now, how did I get off on this subject? Well, I was talking with a new client this morning, and we were talking about related goods and why it matters. So briefly, just to back up and give an overall explanation, goods in the trademark world, goods and services, are classified according to one or more international classes. So the entire universe of goods and services, everything that you can think of, from A to Z, everything in between, they're all classified as international classes. Now, just because, I was explaining to him, just because goods are in the same international class doesn't necessarily mean that they are related. And just because goods are not in the same international class doesn't mean that they're not related. Why does this matter? Well, when you apply for a trademark, if your proposed trademark is confusingly similar to an existing mark in a related good or service, that mark will be refused registration. So we first need to figure out what exactly are related goods. Now, just because they're in the same class, international class of goods, doesn't mean that they're necessarily related. And just because they're not in the same class of goods, doesn't mean that they're not related. Let me explain by giving a couple of examples. So here's an example of goods and services that are in different classes but are considered related. Let's look at shoes and cosmetics. Now, aside from the fact that girls love both shoes and cosmetics, so they're related in that respect, but we wouldn't normally consider them to be really related because they are in different international classes. Clothing is in class 25 and cosmetics are in class 3. So why does the trademark office consider goods like this to be related? Well, they're considered related because it's typical for those sorts of goods to come from, or we say emanate from, the same source. What do I mean? Let's take, for example, Tom Ford. Tom Ford is a high-end designer, and his company produces cosmetics. They produce shoes, they produce clothing, they produce perfume, they produce handbags. Because consumers are used to seeing those goods emanating from the same source in the marketplace, the trademark office considers those goods, shoes and handbags and cosmetics and clothing, those are related goods in the marketplace. Why does it matter? It matters because if we get an application that is confusingly similar to an existing mark that's already on the record, that's already been registered, the trademark examiner may refuse that mark, and probably will, because it's confusingly similar. So anytime that we are worried about whether or not the consumer will be confused as to the source of the goods and services, then that mark is considered confusingly similar. What's another example? Let's take Giorgio Armani. Armani produces, among other things, clothing, shoes, handbags, perfume, makeup. So all of those things are considered related goods. So if a mark was applied for, if there was an application submitted for the name Arsani, that would likely be considered confusingly similar if it were for the same goods. Like say it's Arsani for shoes. That would be considered confusingly similar to Armani for shoes. Let's say it was, submitted for handbags. It would likewise be confusingly similar to shoes or cosmetics because we're used to seeing the same company producing those sorts of goods. It's also possible to have goods in the same international class that are completely unrelated. This is one of my favorite examples. Take ant farms, okay? You know those ant farms where It's basically ants in a glass, like terrarium, so that the kids can watch the ants doing their thing, doing ant stuff like taking food around the colony. I know it's weird, right? But ant farms are in the same classification, the same international classification as cookie presses. Okay, cookie presses where it looks like a gun, like a caulk gun, and you put the dough in and then you hold it next to the cookie sheet and you pull the little trigger and out pops, I think they call them spritz cookies, but out pops a little bit of dough in a certain shape. If it's Christmas, maybe it's bells or snowflakes. But anyway, those two types of goods are in the same international class. I forget which one. I think it's class 31, class 21, actually. So that's really weird. I have no idea why they're in the same international class, but they're not considered related goods because we don't see, as consumers, we don't see the same companies producing ant farms and cookie presses, okay? So it's a little bit weird, it's a little bit confusing, but it matters because when we look at a likelihood of confusion, that's what we care about. If there's a likelihood of confusion between Mark A and existing Mark B, then there's going to be a rejection for that application. So we care about whether or not the goods are similar, whether we're used to seeing them in the same stream of commerce. So that's confusingly similar and international classes of goods. If you have any questions, maybe I didn't explain this very well. If you'd like to have a follow-up video on this subject, go ahead and message me at my Facebook page, facebook.com/TrademarkDoctor. You can also find me online at TrademarkDoctor.net. And if you think other people might like this video, go ahead and share it. I encourage that. I'll see you tomorrow.